Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg, and I am so excited. I have this wonderful guest today. He is a plethora of knowledge and he has so many great tips to share. And I would love for him to introduce himself. He's a friend and a colleague, and I've referred many people to him over the years. He's helped with all different types of issues: smoking cessation, anxiety, nail biting, and I could go on and on. But he will explain. He's from the Westchester Hypnosis Center. And without further ado, Bob, please explain.
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for having me on your podcast here, Dr. Maidenberg. It's really a pleasure. It's okay with you. I'll just call you Michelle for the purpose
Please
of
do.
brevity in this little video.
Yes.
So, yes, my name is Bob Pargament of the Westchester Hypnosis Center, and I've been in practice for 16 years, practicing hypnosis. Became certified in hypnosis around the beginning of 2004. And I work on many issues with hypnosis. So this is an interesting time for hypnosis as a modality, because there are so many different issues that people are facing in this age of COVID-19 or Corona, whatever you prefer to call it. But it is a trying time without a doubt. And people are experiencing different things. They're experiencing fear. They're experiencing isolation, loneliness, anxiety as a result of that. Often certain behaviors like smoking or overeating are factors in this. There's, of course, the dynamics of being confined with family sometimes, which can be trying. It can be wonderful, but it can also be trying for some. So hypnosis helps to address many issues, as you mentioned before. It is really a broad spectrum application. It works for many, many different things. After doing it for all of these years, I'm often still amazed by it. I truly am. It is a wonderful, natural process that calms the mind. Everybody experiences it naturally and organically in their lives. Daydreaming is a light expression of it. But I'm here really to talk today about a technique that we use in hypnosis that is actually not hypnosis per se, but can facilitate hypnosis and can help with many other issues. So before I get too immersed in the details of hypnosis, let me go directly to this process called EFT, which has become very, very popular now with a lot of therapists and certainly many hypnotists. It's a very, very simple and easy process that's highly effective. I'll give you a quick background on my story with EFT, my relationship to it. So I first saw EFT about 20 some odd years ago, prior to my practicing hypnosis. A friend of mine who was very much on top of all the most cutting edge techniques, he and his wife owned a massage therapy school out in the Midwest in Iowa, actually, knew about this process as it was just coming onto the scene, so to speak, and demonstrated it to me. And I didn't really identify with it at that point. I didn't understand the value of what this had to offer. Seemed to me to be a little bit new agey at first, honestly, just revealing my initial take on this. It seemed like something that just didn't make sense to my rather logical approach that I try to maintain in understanding things. I come from my father was an engineer. Everything is kind of logical and structured, but EFT didn't really register with me. And then when I became a hypnotist a few years later, I started to hear about other hypnotists who were using EFT, and many hypnotists are also psychologists or psychiatrists. They use it, of course, in their practice. Hypnosis goes back to Freud and Carl Jung and all of these greats in the realm of mental health. Let's use that as a heading. But anyway, I started to hear of other hypnotists who were using this, and they were reporting very interesting results. So it was counterintuitive to me to absorb this, but then I started using it with clients, particularly anxiety clients. As I mentioned, a lot of people come to me for anxiety. And I would say, a pretty broad spectrum of anxious people, from low levels of anxiety to high levels of anxiety. And when somebody would come into me with those higher levels of anxiety, even though I'm quite practiced at getting people into hypnosis very easily, I always thought in the back of my mind, okay, this person's anxious. They may need a little extra help, and EFT can do that. So before I'll just back up a little bit chronologically. So when I first started using it, I used it on myself because I would use it in particular for an occasional sleep issue that I had, which was what I call my alarm clock brain. So I have this tendency, and still do actually, to when I have to be up early the next morning for an appointment, for a flight, to give a speech, whatever it might be, my alarm clock brain goes off way, way early, 2, 3 in the morning, and my energy's all up here, and I'm in a state of tumult, and I can't get back to sleep because I'm thinking, don't be late for this appointment tomorrow, whatever it might be.
That is definitely a chronic problem that a lot of people have.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I guess I've heard other people in my explanation like this to others reveal that as well. But I would start doing this tapping process, EFT, which I'm going to explain in greater detail in just a moment. And I just noticed that something would shift inside of me, a palpable, all really measurable shift inside of me, subtle but noticeable, and it would allow me to go back to sleep. This energy, which was roiling up here somewhere, all of a sudden kind of sank down into a more sublime, easier level, and I'd be able to go back to sleep. It was really quite interesting, and it would repeat. It would be reliable repeatedly. So anyway, so when clients would come into me with anxiety, I would just notice that after doing this process, which I'm going to teach your viewers in just a moment, that people go into very deep states of hypnosis right after doing that. So let's go to what EFT is. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, or as some say, Emotional Freedom Therapy. It grew out of what was called thought field therapy that was kind of in vogue in the 1980s. And anyway, skipping beyond that history, EFT uses acupressure tapping on certain pressure points on the hands, the face, and the chest in a sequence. It doesn't have to be this exact sequence, but if you follow the sequence that I'll teach, it makes it just easier to memorize these points. And I'm going to show an abbreviated version of it.
Okay.
So the premise behind EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, or Emotional Freedom Therapy, is that all negative emotions are a disruption of the body's energy system. So it approaches it from an energy perspective, as Reiki does, for those people who might understand or know about Reiki. I would say hypnosis is also in that field. Arguably EMDR, something that I know you practice, is also in a related energy field. I call these techniques, my parlance, my particular phrase, neuromechanical systems, because they bypass the logic and the critical factor of the mind to achieve an outcome. So this uses acupressure tapping. You're simply tapping on pressure points while you're present. You're not in hypnosis, but it quickly relaxes the mind and the body. And at the same time, you're reciting a little phrase, a mantra. This was the part that I probably thought was a little bit new agey when I first learned it. It just my quirkiness, what can I say? And the phrase goes like this. This is sort of the template phrase that you use with EFT. Even though I feel this anxiety or sleeplessness or fear or sadness, whatever it might be, I deeply and completely accept myself. That's the phrase that you say. So again, it rang a little new agey for me, but because that was my programming to detect things that sounded a little new agey. But I've learned along the way of my life that many things are counterintuitive, and many things work in very interesting ways that are hard to explain. This one uses pressure points that have been known by the Chinese for thousands and thousands of years through acupuncture. Acupressure, the tapping on these same points that needles would normally be inserted in is actually, according to some of the research that I've read, be just as effective, if not more effective, by tapping on these nerve endings. So while you're tapping on these nerve endings, which relax the neurology of the body, the nervous system of the body, you're also speaking this phrase. You're going to say the phrase 3 times on each tapping point. And if you break the phrase down into 2 parts, it really does make more sense. It took all of that new agey skepticism out of me when I started to analyze it. The first part is naming the feeling. Sometimes just by speaking to something, as you well know, as a therapist, people let the steam out of the pipe, right? They open up the valve, pressure is out, and they feel better.
And
So
it's validating. It's
exactly.
self-validating. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Exactly. You're acknowledging what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so it helps to center the mind on what the issue is.
Yeah.
And then on the second part, again, the first part is even though I feel this, fill in the blank with the name of the issue. Then the second part is, and I deeply and completely accept myself, which to me simply means that, you're acknowledging the fact that you're a human being and human beings feel these things,
Yes.
Whether it's during this stressful time or just when life is more quote unquote normal, we experience these things. And to acknowledge the humanity inside of us while you're relaxing your nervous system through this tapping creates a synergistic effect that I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
So,
And could I
yes.
just say one thing? Because, the way that I also think about it is, feeling and healing is messy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this makes it less messy, I think, in a way, because it's bypassing this mechanism that we usually engage to try to sort our problems out, called the conscious mind. And of course, in that, there's the egoic mind, and there's all of these different elements that we bring into it. This goes right to a mechanical process, which kind of bypasses all of that messiness, I think.
Right,
So,
but I feel like you have to be accepting that that's there,
oh yeah, yeah,
When I say messy, I mean more like just accepting that it's there, not judging it or not struggling with it or not battling it, right? Like, because when you said what you said, what was so powerful about me is it's like, it's if you think about it, it's really, really, unconditional acceptance.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
I deeply and completely accept
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is speaking to your own humanity,
Yeah.
because what you just said, I think, rings very true for me. There's that old expression, what you resist persists.
Yeah.
So by, the more Zen-like approach is to just let it kind of be, and then it
Yeah.
loses a lot of its energy,
Yeah.
its sting, its power over you, however you want
Yeah.
to phrase it.
Yeah.
So the research seems to suggest, there's a great book, I'm going to hold it up so your viewers can see this. You might be interested in reading this, viewers. The Tapping Solution. This is a book that came out fairly recently about EFT. There are many videos about it. There are many different ways to do it, but there are sort of standard formats that you can follow, and I'm going to teach that today, because these tapping points are pretty much show up in pretty much all of these techniques, but there are a few added ones sometimes. I'm going to show you the simplified version so people can memorize it easily, and it seems to work quite well. So one of the things that it does also, just on the biological or physiological or neurological level, is that it seems to work on the limbic portion of the brain, the limbic system, allowing some sort of temporal shift in in this part of the brain. I'm not a neurosurgeon, although I play one on TV. But anyway, in all seriousness, the research seems to suggest, it's mentioned in this book and elsewhere, that it allows the brain to process temporally, to put things into perspective, into a past tense. So you feel the time has sort of elapsed, and the tapping facilitates that. The tapping more so than the actual phrasing. The phrasing helps you address the issue and hone in on it and acknowledge what's going on. But the tapping does something to, below that threshold of consciousness, shift the feeling inside. So I think what happens ultimately is that you're addressing the issue, you're speaking to it, anxiety or sleeplessness, whatever it might be, and the brain is recording relaxation, a relaxation response from these pressure points, which are all connected to key organs in the body and
Mhm.
certain parts of the brain, apparently. And so the brain records, oh, when I think about this issue, I remember being relaxed. There's a confluence, a kind of a neuroplasticity merging of these two elements that I think allow the brain to think of it differently.
Association. Sounds like an association.
Yeah, I think it is. That's a great way to put it. So EFT, emotional freedom technique. The first thing you want to do before you start the process, is to name the feeling. Okay, so I encourage your listeners, your viewers to identify what's going on. Most people generally know. They know I'm anxious, I'm sleepless, I'm fearful, I'm angry, I'm jealous, whatever the negative
Huh?
emotion might be. And by the way, it's applicable to certain physical issues. People who might have a chronic um, physical condition, which can sometimes be subconscious in its nature. I
Mhm.
encourage people to read the work of Dr. John Sarno and people like that.
Yes.
This can be something that's lingering in the recesses of the subconscious mind and is manifesting as perhaps a distraction in
Mhm.
physical form. So EFT might be used for that. There's no harm to this. It's an absolutely harmless process. So why not give it a try, right?
Mhm.
But anyway, back to this process. So name the feeling, and then try to gauge on a SUD scale, the subjective unit of discomfort scale. I think it stands for, you tell me if I'm
Yes.
right about
Yeah.
that. On a 1 to 10, how strong is the feeling? So you can compare before the tapping and then after the tapping.
Mhm.
The tapping may take a few rounds. You're going to tap on one side of the body. You're tapping on nerve endings that branch down from the top of the head through down to the feet, but all the tapping is from the torso up. And if the level shifts, let's say you're at a 10 with anxiety, if you then assess it after you do the tapping and now it's a 6 or a 7, that's great. You made great progress. Then do it again, try the other side, or repeat it on the same side. Do it a few times because it works through. The other thing people should do is try to be as specific as possible. So let's say it's about anxiety. It might be, in the case of what we're going through right now, anxiety about being confined to the home, or anxiety about not being able to go to work, or anxiety about money, perhaps. It can be anything in one's particular case. But the more specific, the more the brain can zero in on it and get the benefits of this process. So here's how you do it. So you're going to
Right.
start by tapping on what we call the karate chop side of the hand, tapping right here on the fleshy part below the pinky. Once you choose a hand, keep all the tapping on that side of the body. There are techniques where you do both simultaneously, but I'm going to make it simple here. So you're tapping on the fleshy part of the hand, and you would say, let's say for anxiety, even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you repeat it twice more. Even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. And one more time, even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. Again, use it for anything.
Mhm.
So now I'll take off my glasses because we're going to tap on the face. So we start with the karate chop. And at the end of this video, by the way, we'll try to incorporate a
Yes.
little diagram to help people. So now you're going to tap, because I was tapping on my left hand to the right of the viewer who's watching this. You're going to tap now over the left side of the face, starting with where the eyebrow and the bridge of the nose meet, repeating that phrase, even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. Tapping 10 or 15 times, gently but firmly at the same time, not so light that you don't feel it, and not so hard that you bruise yourself. So now you're going to go to the end of the eyebrow, repeating that same phrase. Even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. saying it 3 times on that tapping point. Then under the eye, on the cheekbone, right here, right in the center of the eye, saying that phrase, even though I feel this anxiety about not being able to go to work, I deeply and completely accept myself. And again, one can use their own words to make it a little bit more customized. Then under the nose, right here, saying the same thing 3 times, and under the lower lip where the chin begins, right here. Acupuncturists all know these points. There's nothing new about these. But here's what you just did thus far. You started with the karate chop, just as a reminder. You did 5 points on the face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like to give the visual that that's a question mark. This would be the dot on the question mark, okay? Just as a mnemonic, a memory tool to remember the image. Now, you're going to go to your chest. You're going to tap under the nub of the collarbone. Feel the little bump on your collarbone on that same side of your body, in this case, my left. And you're tapping under that little nub of your collarbone. And then you're going to tap and say the phrase 3 times. And you move down diagonally into the pectoral muscle, right about here. Let me tilt my camera back so you can see that a little bit better. Right there, right above the center, the middle of the breast, basically. Then you're going to tap on the ribs underneath the armpit, about 3 inches down from the armpit. And you can tap around the area just to make sure you get these nerve endings. And you're saying the phrase again 3 times. So you've made now a straight line. 1 under the nub of the collarbone, 2 in the pectoral muscle, 3 under the armpit, about 3 inches down on the seam of the shirt or the blouse, and then coming back for one more tapping point on the rib cage, right below the nipple, basically. So you're really making a straight line, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, like it's a V. Straight line down, 3 points, and then 1 over here. The last point in this abbreviated version of EFT, which is quite effective, is the top of the head. So some call that in certain philosophies the crown chakra, whatever it might be, but the top of the head. So you've done the karate chop, the 5 points on the face is a question mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the dot on the question mark. 4 points on the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the top of the head. And another time we can do a longer version of it with a few more tapping points, but this one works quite nicely. So I encourage people then to reassess, try to determine where's that level now. It was at a 7 or an 8 or a 9 when I started. Where's it at now? I've never seen it go up. In the thousands of times that I've applied it, it just always goes down. It rarely even stays the same. It generally goes down and to a noticeable difference. And what people will often do, I've seen this many times, they'll yawn. There's a lot of yawning that goes after doing this. And I think that's some sort of release of energy as well. So that's basically EFT in a nutshell. The thing that I was skeptical of, I now have a fondness for. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to just share the screen for a moment just to show those 2 diagrams. So I will get that up for you. So that's the karate chop.
Correct. Right under the pinky.
That Bob was talking about, the one under the arm. It shows you exactly where it is. And then we're on the hands. And this is, you could go to www.thetappingsolution.com and that picture appears there. And then I will show you the other one too. And these are the tapping points. Is this on the same website? It looks that way.
Yeah, and you can see it's slightly different here. Just there's 2 points that are different. They do the same facial ones. They do the top of the head. They do 2 points on the torso, under the nub of the collarbone, as I showed. They don't do the one that's in the middle between that and the under the arm, and they don't do the one directly on the rib cage. I'm giving a few extra points. It's perfectly good to do it, my way or their way.
Yeah.
But I add those in.
And I expect if you go to different, again, websites, right, you'll find all different ways to do it, and that's true for, I think, any type of treatment. There's different modalities and you have to really customize it for yourself.
Exactly.
Whatever works for you. If there's like a trigger point somewhere that doesn't feel comfortable, right, and it's actually doing the opposite, obviously you're going to leave that one out. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't, it never makes it worse. So I don't think
Right.
it's not going to ramp anything up. That
Okay.
I've never seen.
Yeah.
And I've done so many times.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to say, just because I do a lot of trauma work also,
Yeah.
is, we have to be careful just that we don't, trigger, because our bodies are very sensitive. And sometimes it could be located somewhere on our body that could trigger, sensations. And it's usually, related to our senses. And that's where, so I'm just going to say, like, if there's a certain, like, kind of trigger point that gives an association, like you said before, to something that's negative, right? So just, to
Yeah,
be aware.
because people can see these points in advance.
Yep.
They may likely know that this would be a possible trigger point. I've not seen that also in my
Okay.
many applications,
Okay.
but I get how that could possibly be.
Yeah. So, Bob, thank you so much.
You're very
That
welcome.
was so helpful. You gave us such a great history and an understanding of what it is and how it can be helpful. And I hope people will take advantage of trying it out, because I always believe that, proof is in the pudding, right? Like, we have to, you can't drink the Kool-Aid unless you do it yourself. We could talk about
Absolutely.
how effective it is, but unless you actually try it and see its effectiveness, the thing that I like about it too, which you described, is, to me, it is an amazing grounding exercise. So if you're activated and, like, your parasympathetic nervous system is all over the place,
Right.
and like, for me, I could see that that could be a really, really wonderful grounding exercise too.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
really does do.
yeah.
That's a beautiful word to apply there. If people want to learn more, should I give my contact
Sure,
information?
sure.
Well, they can go to my website. That's probably the easiest way, which is Westchester Hypnosis, which is spelled HYPNOSIS .com, westchesterhypnosis.com, or they can use hypnosiswestchester.com. I own both domain names. So by all means, call me if you have any questions. I'm glad to help. We need
Yeah.
to share information in this day and age.
And Bob is always really helpful, I have to say. So
Well, thank you.
you're in good hands.
Well, thank you,
So
Michelle.
thank you so much again. It was so great having you, and we really appreciate your explanation. It was wonderful.
My pleasure. My